Garrett, Susan Barone, Julie Lamoureux, Joseph Granga, and Mark Gabriel, Agency Counsel.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for a motion for the approval of the last meeting minutes on March 19th, 2025. I need a motion. Mr. Burley and Mr. Massey, second. The question is, there anything you don't like there? You don't? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And at this time, I'll bring on Mr. Gabriel.
Thank you, Chairman Ross. I appreciate it. Now, this is a preliminary committee meeting, really. That I just wanted to go over a outline for you and what, get your input of what we should be looking at, what I see as potential revisions moving forward. There are a couple of consequence. Most of them are in decent shape, actually beyond decent shape. We're in compliance. In fact, we're ahead of a lot of other similarly situated IDAs. But one of the policies that we're going to be providing you updates in between now and the next meeting to not just the committee, but also to all the board members would be our procurement policy. Our procurement policy is actually in good shape. I think it's the numbers themselves are dated. And when you read a procurement policy and when council gets confused by it, I think there's a need to clarify it a little bit more so that it's not as ultra specific, but covers the areas we need to. So what I've actually done, I pretty much have that procurement policy redlined, showing the changes, the new language. So the procurement policy is always something that is very near and dear to Andrea's and staff's heart, because obviously we don't want to do anything to violate that policy. There's very specific guidelines that are set forth. I want to make it as easy as possible for staff to follow that. And what they do anyway is they usually, hey, we want to do this. Mark, is this in the policy? Yes, it is. You're good. But nevertheless, procurement policy is one of them that I believe needed and needs some updating. The second is there's a new requirement that just came out not too long ago based upon COVID. It's called, we are now required to have an infectious disease policy. So it is what it is. I've gone on the website for the state. They have templates there, which are great. I'm not going to go into it too much, but it's a lot for nothing. But the bottom line, it's certainly something we need to check the box on. So what you'll see is a new infectious disease policy come before you in the next few weeks that will hopefully, get to the board for final approval and add-ons to our group. The most interesting of all the policies that we're looking at is the solar policy that we have. We've actually, Andrea and I have another call today, but we've been involved with the county on this because we want to make sure that we're not doing anything as being the agency that will cause problems in the county, problems in towns and cities, that can be, where it is right now, and I didn't want a handout, that's why there's no handout. Where it is right now is we have limited our abilities based upon what was in place 2, 3, 4 years ago to providing solar projects only with sales tax exemption benefits. Now, under state law now, any solar project automatically gets the 4% from state. Doesn't even need our approval. But it would be the county portion, the local portion of the 4% sales tax. As it stands now, there's no pilot, there's no mortgage tax benefit because we're not taking leasehold interest. And it's also limited, which I think is actually a continued answer going forward, but I don't want to speak to it until we have more conversations with other entities. that we have agreed not to accept any application for a solar project unless the host community consents to us doing so. And that's not all of them. Let's say the project is located in the city of Niagara Falls. That means the city of Niagara Falls in writing must consent to us accepting the application and moving forward to it. It also right now is limited to those brownfield sites, industrial sites, landfills, those types of areas only. So there was a desire not to open it up to basically greenland, farmland, these various items. But I think what we're looking at now is that might have been overkill a little bit. You know, we're always worried here in the county, like everyone else, about local rule. We get annoyed when the state comes down and tells us, you know, what to do here in our county. We'll run what we want to. For the county now to tell the local town what should go in their place, I think we're almost violating the sub-local rule by telling them what they want. I think having that provision built in still, where if a town of, let's go Wilson, wants a solar array on a farm, and the town of Wilson tells us that's what they want, okay, that's why they're elected, they make that choice, then we handle it from there. Town of Wilson says, no, we don't want that, but we will take one, this project here we don't want because it's on farmland. Wilson then turns around, but this project here we do want because that's on a landfill. Perfect. But if we have that ability for the local town itself, town, city, and village, to make that ultimate determination of how and what is put in their town, city, and village, I think it actually relieves the agency of making that discussion or that decision, which we don't want to be in a position where we make decisions on you know, that type of usage of land. But at the same time, you know, add back into it, if they do want that, why wouldn't we still have the pilot involved in the mortgage tax? If that's exactly kind of way we were before we made this change. Like we've had the Kilmer project and the CDE project before that. That was the last projects we did before this mini change. And since the mini change, we haven't had one project come through, and solar is starting to heat up, it looks like, in this area again. We'll adjust. So just, you know, those are the things that we need to take a look at moving forward. I think hopefully we'll get a little bit more guidance. You know, right now, some of them are, you know, developers, from what I've understand, I've talked to some developers, I've talked to some other IDA attorneys, I've talked to a bunch. Developers want to pay X amount of dollars per megawatt. That's how they assess it. Under a pilot, as you may or may not know, taxes received from that are based and distributed by ratio of your tax rates from the county, school, and local municipality. Let's call it city. And that's no deviation, it's broken down. Here, if it's broken down by megawatt, it doesn't matter as long as once you get the whole thing, it's divided the same way. In that ratio, it's not what's called a deviation, it's done properly. But a couple of years ago, Angie and I were involved in one that, and I won't mention the town here, under 487, I'm sorry to throw numbers at you, but under 487 of tax of New York state law, municipalities can enter into pilots as well. And I've seen it, and I've seen the pilots from Grand Island, I've seen it from Wheatfield, as a matter of fact. I've seen these pilots. We got approached, and keeping in mind, again, these developers don't want to pay more than $10,000 per megawatt when they come in. And that's all in, including community host agreements and pilot payments. Well, this particular town, what they wanted to do to stop it from deviation and where they needed consent, hey, we're going to do a community host for $8,000 and $1,000 for a pilot, and the pilot for $1,000 is divided equally between the three or by ratio to the taxing jurisdictions. So basically, they were taking 95% of the money, really sticking it to the school and the county for that community host agreement on the side. what we would do and what a lot of these groups do, these IDAs who have pilots as part, they put a minimum range in of like $5,000 a megawatt into their pilot policy, which requires and kind of stops other types of communities from trying to be, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. It's, that's what we're trying to avoid. So, there's a lot of moving parts in this. What we're starting, and Andrea pointed out perfectly last week when we were talking about it, is we may be leaving, the county in particular and the schools may be leaving significant monies, tax monies, on the table by not being involved in this. And I think that's something, that I think is, I know the county manager is very interested in it. We're trying to become even more versed. I think we're all fairly versed on 487 and the effects. The problem is now it's how it's being implemented. And then, okay, what's the path we're going to take moving forward, and how does the IDA's policy affect that path? And that's, I have 3 or 4 versions that I've already marked up on our solar policy that will depend on, which way we, the county goes and which way our discussions go when we take a peek at these. But I think it's the way of going that right now we may rename it a green policy instead of solar, because there are wind, and as long as we have that catch-all where the local entity has to consent to our involvement, that's your catch-all. We can't get blamed. Whoa, what do you mean? Yeah, we did a pilot, but this is where it is. They asked us to be involved. They consented in writing to it. So we can't be attacked by shoving a wind farm in the middle of Cambria against the wishes of the town of Cambria. Well, we would never have got to this point if it wasn't. So they still get control of it. So sorry for the preamble, but is there any thoughts, questions, anything? Yeah.
You mentioned schools could take advantage of this too. As the Superintendent Association, Niagara Orleans, has this been on their priority list? Because schools are always looking for a few extra dollars.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it is. We don't get a lot of contact, to be honest with you, by school districts at all. They sit back and don't get too much involved. Where, you may end up, and again, school districts aren't, for purposes of the solar portion of it or wind portion or whatever, they have no say with permitting. They have no say with, uses of land and projects and rezonings. That's why we've left that consent and master planning to the various towns, villages, and cities. That's where that belongs. So the schools will go along. What a typical one that I've come across is would kind of have, under the scenario I set forth, the following makeup. You would go in, it would go to town XYZ. The town would look at it and then consent to the agency being involved. And at that particular time, we would be involved. Under the policy that I foresee, potentially, they would be the pilot would be made up of $5,000 per megawatt. Let's say it's a 50,000 megawatt facility. So that would be the pot. That pot would be divided equally, by ratio of tax rates to the school, county, and that town. The school being the bigger player, usually 60% of that. County is 25 to 30%, and the town's a much smaller thing. In addition to that, each one of those hosts, those 3 entities, ATJs, affected taxing jurisdictions, would enter into their own, and have entered into their own community host agreement with this developer, where they would pay them directly as a community host X amount of dollars. So that in totality, between the pilot, which is divided by tax rate ratio, and what they would pay annually to the community host, it would end up somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000. That is basically, and we don't get involved in any regards to the negotiation and drafting of the community host agreements. That is between the ATJs and the company. But that is probably as clean and as clear as a project that I've seen, that most of them fit right into that area. And what I said about those who don't enter into it, let's say a school or a county or whatever decides, no, we don't agree, we're not doing, well, you're leaving money on the table. That's tax revenues that you can use moving forward. And it's also to keep in mind, as everyone knows, strangely, it's hard to say it's, but we're step on step. This is something New York State is highly motivated to do, is to bring these wind and solar, in particular, farms here into New York, and to be a very large percentage of clean energy by a specific date. So it's not like we're running afoul of what they want by helping these companies. They want us to basically help these companies. So it's something I think deserves, and especially potentially needs a little bit more of our attention. But we want to make sure that what we are doing, we coordinate it with, with certain other groups. We want to keep the county involved, since we are a county agency, just for their thoughts and whatnot. Anybody else? Interesting, huh, Jay? It's really not. It's over the top. So that's basically it. So you'll be getting something going forward, and we'll report back. More quick. You'll get some of the draft policies quicker than June. It'll probably be the next 10 days.
Do you expect to propose these for next month's meeting?
So eventually, I'd like to have some interaction in between, and then, and if we get to a point that one or more of them are ready for, to be sent to the board for consideration, then we'll bring it up to next month. If it pushes us to July, it pushes us to July. But if we don't start the process, we can't end the process, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other matters the committee wishes to discuss? Thank you. Now I'm looking for a motion for adjournment. Mr. Massey, motion. Mr. Barubi, second. All in favor?